First, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this event. Donna Russo Morin is a historical novelist and artist. She is the author of the Da Vinci's Disciple series and best-selling Gilded Summers and Gilded Dreams. And our featured author today is Stephanie Renée dos Santos. She is the author of Cut from the Earth, a semi-finalist for the 2019 Chanticleer International Book Reviews Chaucer Book Awards. This is her first novel. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Studio Arts from Whitman College. A native of the United States, she divides her time between the Pacific Northwest and Brazil. She's here today to present her first book, Cut from the Earth. Please welcome Stephanie and Donna.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, thanks for coming.
I'm going to switch to gallery view. There we go. It helps, Stephanie.
Okay, me too. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. First, I have to tell you all what an honor and a privilege it is for me to be here with Stephanie. I think she is one of the most talented and determined and passionate writers that I've ever had the pleasure to meet. And we were just saying how we met 6 years ago this very month, in fact, this very week at the Historical Novel Society conference. At that time, it was in Denver, I believe we were.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, we were. So let's start, Stephanie. You teased me a little with how you became a historical novelist. What drew you to become a historical novelist? And your tease left me hanging so much that I think everyone would love to hear the story.
Okay, that was purposeful.
Like
any good writer, the cliffhanger at the end of the
cliffhanger. It was great.
So it was back actually in 2005 or 6, I can't remember exactly. And I was painting endangered plant species of the Americas. And there's some paintings here from that series on the walls here. And I was flying into Lima, Peru, and I had picked up or received a book, Inés of My Soul from Isabel Allende, historical novel, fantastic. And as I was flying, and I read the whole entire thing on the flight, and it absolutely captured my attention. Like, I was completely in love with the story, and hearing about a story of an untold women's contributions historically to the Americas. It was from there that it was an epiphany at 3,500, 35,000 feet.
Right.
This is what I'm supposed to do. And so I landed in Lima, 2 a.m. in the morning, the middle of the night, got to the hotel, and was awoken by a fist fight outside my door. I can only imagine they were two drunken men, petrified. And I fled Lima, and I had gone to Peru specifically to seek out an ayahuasquero shaman. And this shaman was not just any ayahuasquero shaman. He was painting his visions from the hallucinogenic visions of the combination of these two vines. And his paintings are absolutely amazing. But the real thing that drew me to his work and why I wanted to meet him was he was working with native tribes all along the tributaries of the Ucayali River, which connects into the Amazon River, to help the youth in these communities to record their mythological and legends of their tribes as modernization was rapidly making inroads into these waterbound communities. And so, yeah, I had gone there to to meet him and to see his works, and I met some of his students. And then I took a transport boat from Pucallpa up the Ucayali River to Iquitos, where I was going to go paint some plants and seek out some rare plants. And So I found while I was in transport there, I convinced the crew to allow me to pitch a tent on the deck of this boat, because I was solo and traveling alone as a woman. And I wanted to make sure that I could keep an eye on my things. And but the crew said they agreed to it eventually, but they asked me to please stay in my tent at night. But they didn't tell me why. And so that meant giving up access to the bathroom at the evening, but I have a way that I could handle that. So that was, but I won't get into those details now, but
No.
I was awoken at night by gunfire. Tracers, white tracers on the nylon of my tent, the nylon walls of my tent.
Sure.
It's totally petrifying. And all I can guess is that the transport ship was transporting things that they weren't supposed to be transporting. Contraband, I have no idea really, but it was exciting.
Don't tell.
It was wild. And but then I got to Iquitos and I went by canoe and painted these plants, accessing primary rainforest. And while I was traveling those 4 days, I hadn't realized everything that I was seeing was secondary growth all along the Ucayali River, the main tributary that connects right into the Amazon. And so coming back on Christmas Day, like accompanied by like 20 pairs of macaw birds that are yellow and blue, the colors of 18th century Portuguese style.
Right.
And I got back to Iquitos and I was going to have lunch by myself. And I was walking along the boardwalk that abuts the river. And I just started looking around, and all the buildings had this decaying tile work all over it. And I had gone to school in Europe, in Florence, Italy, and also studied art history in London, and spent a summer in the Algarve of Portugal. And so it already had been exposed to a lot of tile work. And I was just like, why is this here? I mean, you can only access Iquitos by plane or by boat. It's completely landlocked. And it's really deep in the Amazon. And so I was just completely blown away and just really curious. And so as I was having lunch, like a torrential downpour fell and like a cascade of water entering into this eatery. And I just had an epiphany that all the hardwoods that had been extracted all along the waterways that I had, passed in the 4 days on this boat, that was taken to Europe and made into these gorgeous churches. So, I mean, for those that have traveled to Europe, that there's tons of beautiful hardwoods in these churches. And it was at that moment that I realized this is where all of these hardwoods had come from. It was here in the Amazon. And then it dawned on me that if that was so, then they must have brought in the tile works as a way either to display their wealth. And as it turns out, because I did go back and research this once I got back to the United States, it would tile placed on the outside of buildings helps break the humidity for homes. And so it was part, functional and then decorative. So it was like trading one beauty for another. Yeah. And it was at that moment in that eatery, in this torrential downpour with this epiphany, that Cut from the Earth, I really feel was born, because I was just completely just enraptured, curious about the story of this exchange of one beauty for the other. Sure. And it was from there that I began researching and then discovered the Great Lisbon earthquake, and then came across the information of the figura de convite, an invitation figure, which we'll get to.
I won't say it with an Italian accent. Yes. So then, would you say that you were inspired to become a historical novelist quite specifically to this book, all at the same time? It was sort of one epiphany bound together in this journey.
Yes, I'd say that's fair to say. And at the time I mean, you don't know, these things come through you.
They do. But the channel.
Yeah, it was like this. It was just like the right combination of things coming together. And
Yes.
from that point on, I mean, I was researching, but there's another story that leads in how I actually came to start writing the story. And that's
Okay.
jumping some years ahead, when I was dating a Brazilian man, and it was in Brazil. And some familial things happened, and we ended up deciding to jump ship and leave the continent. And we packed up a wooden dory, an open wooden dory, and we set out for 40 days to explore the uninhabited, isolated islands off the coast of Brazil. And we left with no life jackets, which I don't recommend, but
No.
it was very, again, inspiration in the moment.
Sure.
And I had on my person at that time a book, Write Your First Novel. So obviously it was in my consciousness to do this at this point, and this was like about 2009, 2010. And it was on that trip in a journal that I wrote 70 pages of Cut from the Earth.
Goodness.
So in a tent by fireside, torrential rainstorms, it's its own story in itself.
It is. It certainly sounds like it. And to write it in such a, dare I say, old-fashioned manner, sometimes I believe it gives you more time to really think about the words, excuse me, you're forming. Did you find that to be so?
For me, it was as I was living the 18th century, for which the time period of the
Sure.
novel. So
Sure.
I did feel at that time, like, as we were rowing, I mean, we rowed this boat up
Goodness.
we went north on the southern coast of Brazil, and I was living it. And it was, again, totally not planned. You can't contrive these sorts of things.
No, you certainly can't. But I do think between your experiences on that first boat and what you've just shared now,
Interesting. I've never drawn that conclusion till just now.
you might have a book there. It is pretty fascinating, and I'm sure there are many more layers that you're keeping off, but you might want to think about that.
Well, actually, to disclose, book 2, we will go to sea. I can disclose that because
Fab.
2/3 of the book is already written for book 2 in this series. So
Wonderful. Maybe you could think of a companion book, much as Diana Gabaldon has done with Outlander,
Mhm.
where she goes into the details of all of that and where she got her material and how she was inspired. I mean, that boat trip on the Amazon alone to me seems like a large chunk of a companion book. Just a little marketing, perhaps, from someone who's been through, as I said, but I just finished my 11th book, so those kinds of things go well. Readers love them.
Well, I definitely want to talk with you more about this.
We will. But back to Cut from the Earth. So you were an artist setting out on a painter's journey. What was the artistic climate like in the time period that you in Cut from the Earth? Because I think that's an important aspect to
It is. So from about 1700 to 1755 in Portugal, it's referred to by art historians as the cycle of masters. And it's because at that time, Portugal was extracting large amounts of gold and precious gems from their colony, Brazil. And also, an important thing to touch on, also from the trading of humans from the African coast. And so with great wealth, there's money to patronize the arts. And so
somewhat like the Italian Renaissance.
Completely. And so it was from this kind of window of time, there was just a flourishing of tile works that were made and an incredible amount, and that are still, you can still view them today throughout Lisbon and also other areas throughout Portugal. And so the artwork is phenomenal. If you haven't had a chance yet to visit, I do highly recommend going and seeing these works in person. Read the book, go visit, or go visit and then come back and read the book, because it's going to make a lot more sense to you.
Read the book while you're visiting.
Exactly, because it just, there are certain periods, just like the Renaissance, where there is just a body of artistic work that's made that it impacts for all the ages, you know.
It does.
And
Absolutely.
and this is the case with this time period, and few people know about it outside of Portugal or the Iberian Peninsula. And it was while studying the time around the Great Lisbon earthquake, which was on November 1st, 1755, that I discovered, and I came across the figura de convite. And again, I was just completely blown away after studying the arts myself, studying art history, studying, you know, ceramics and painting on my, you know, through school, and then just and doing my own work. And I just started to think about the real impact of the design of the figura de convite, because it was the first time that the tile works had deviated from the square and then followed the outline of a human figure, or like a vase of flowers, or an animal. And it was huge, the impact that that had for further design creativity to open up worldwide.
So the art focus of the story, to be clear to anybody who may be listening that is not sure, is on that tile work.
Yes.
And
celebrating that innovation, that contribution.
Yes. So why do you think, beyond so you've mentioned that it was used on the homes as a form of insulation almost, but there had to be something else about the focus of the art at the time that made it, the tile work specifically, so popular?
Well, it was beautiful. And again, wealth, you want to show your wealth. And so it was a way to demonstrate the affluency of the culture. That's one of the purposes. And
so it was about the culture, it was about the wealth. Was it a status symbol for the wealthy?
Yes, yes. And you're going to find a lot of tile works that are still in existence today from this time period. They're in churches, they're on palaces, they're in royal homes. And so it was a way to display wealth. And there was also, it was interesting, it's kind of like the one-upsmanship in, you know, modern society.
Yes.
When a new design would come out, then, you know, your rich friend or your would want to have the same thing or one-up some. And so for an artist, I mean, I would say that's an artist's dream. And, you know, it's like, all right, let's do this. Let's, you know.
Yes, I'm ready. Yes, let's go for it.
To completely open and flourish into the fullest potential of the medium.
Just out of my own curiosity, percentage-wise, how much do you think has been preserved?
Oh gosh, I can't answer that right now. That could be answered another time. The art historian from the University of Lisbon that I fielded questions with for years. She would be probably a better person to ask that question to.
But as you're walking the streets, how prevalent is it?
Prevalent.
Really?
Yeah.
It is.
It is prevalent still in Portugal. The bus stations, like also public places, spaces. There's fantastic tile work still in existence. Just walking up the streets, like in neighborhoods of the Alfama.
That's wonderful. And who wouldn't want to read a book about something that old and so preserved?
Yeah.
True.
Well, and it's honestly, it's like when you come across a large scale mural, the craftsmanship, their soul, every brush stroke.
Yes.
It exemplifies the soul of the person that painted it, or the team that painted it, or the factory that painted it. And the soul, you know, it's arresting, and it's connecting.
Sure.
to touch
Sure.
into.
That's what we as artists of any medium hope to achieve, isn't it?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that's part of, I would say, a large part of the story of Cut from the Earth is about the artist and his soul.
Yes. What is it? What are the struggles? What are the personal drives? What is it? What's wanting to come through you? Because it usually is something larger than yourself. It's not really actually about you. It's about being a vessel, a channel for something to come through you.
Catalyst. Yes, I agree. Okay, let's talk, describe a little the monogram PMP.
Okay, so PMP is recognized and accredited as the designer of the Figure de Convite, and also other fantastic works that you can still see today, like at the museum of the Tile Museum in Lisbon, the Museu de Azulejos in Lisboa. And
As you said that, not me.
I have to think here between the two languages.
Yes.
And PMP, so it was accredited for being the creator, the innovator of the Figura de Convite. And then, but the person who, it's been lost to art history, who really was PMP. There was a priest whose initials fit the PMP, and he owned a large tile factory shop in Lisbon sometime in between 1700 and 1755. But they can't for sure say that this is the person that is PMP.
Yeah.
And then also the name of the factory, the tile factory, has also been lost. But so I took the liberties to imagine, who really was this artist? Why did they choose initials versus their full name? And in exploring that, and it's having to do with pride, it has to do with vanity, has to do with a lot of things. And then on top of it, there is a Fábrica Santa Ana. It is the longest still existing tile factory that's still operating in Lisbon. It was opened in 1741. You can still go there today and you can visit. And when I was in Lisbon researching this book and making sure the facts were straight.
Sure, double checking your facts.
And, I visited the factory and was toured around it and by the owner, and started to imagine the climate for which, and this is common throughout this type of trade, is there'll be like a group of people that are creating these works, but they're all fall under the name of the tile factory. And so it's the factory that gets the credit, or one person, not the individual artist. And
right, which is again similar to the Renaissance, where the paintings would be attributed to the master of the studio and not necessarily who actually painted it. And that I know to be true for some works of Da Vinci's. It would go under Verrocchio's name because he was the master of the studio. So yeah, it's the same situation.
Yeah, so we have a lot of same similarities here.
Yes.
How these artistic shops worked at this time period. And so by doing so too, this leads into another thing that I really like make sure that we talk about is, so when I started studying there's many different artworks that you can still view today. And that's one of the research tools for a historical novelist, is actual artifacts, and studying what's before your eyes. And there's a panel, it's a 16 panel mural, large scale, and it survived the Great Lisbon earthquake, and it's housed at the Tile Museum in Lisbon, that depicts the whole entire skyline and all the different neighborhoods of Lisbon prior to the Great Lisbon earthquake. And it's magnificent, and it's such a blessing that it survived the Great Lisbon earthquake. And
So it was almost like a map for you
exactly, in tile.
in tile.
Blue and white tile. It's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. And so from studying that, I started to study the different neighborhoods, and it's easy to see on panel 7 the tile factories, because there's large plumes of smoke, snaking
Sure.
up into the sky.
Sure.
And so I started to research what neighborhood was this, and it's called the Macombo. And so what is the Macombo? The Macombo is the first European city to be a predominantly African rooted and descendants of Africans neighborhood. And it began about the next 16th century. And this kind of calls us going back into further back into the history of Portugal. From the 8th century to the 12th century, the Moors from North Africa had invaded Portugal and conquered Portugal and controlled the Iberian Peninsula, being Spain and Portugal. It was in the 12th century that the Portuguese won back the peninsula, Portugal, and gave the Moors, the North African Moors, an option to convert to Catholicism or go back to Africa. And so you have a portion of the population that did go back to Africa and a portion of the population that chose to stay. And so the Macombo was made up of fishermen, of free people, of laundresses, people that worked in homes. And so you had the bound and the free all coexisting together, because what happened was there was a vacuum because the Portuguese had been actually enslaved by the Moors, and they had worked the fields. And then when they took back Lisbon and Portugal, then there was a vacuum. There was who was going to work the fields. And then that's how the African slave trade began in Portugal, was from that need. And so you have a really dynamic climate.
Sure.
Of people that have chosen, that were the conquerors from Africa, and those that were forced to come to Portugal.
Right. But it is oftentimes in such a melting pot that moments like this happen, when you get that kind of unique blend of people. Artistic seems to thrive better.
Completely. And the thing is so when I realized this story is going to be set, this is the neighborhood this story is going to be set in.
Right.
So who are the people then that are working at this factory, this tile factory?
Right. Now, the Fabrica Santa Maria in the Macombo.
Yes, and that's a fictional factory, but it's inspired by the Fabrica Santa Ana that is still in existence. You can go there. The most gorgeous tiles. You must buy tile there.
You just must.
You must buy tile there.
Buy the book, but buy the book first before you buy the tile.
Buy the tile.
Our priorities straight. So you'd make a great spokesperson for them. So you did tell us about the African and the African descendant voices in the story. I personally am just in love with your main character. I find it, yes, just fascinating on so many levels, because he's an artist, but there's so much more to him. Tell us just a little bit about him. He's such a draw for this story.
Well, when I was at the point where I needed to make a decision whether or not to have a female protagonist or have a male protagonist, I made the choice based on the time period to have a male protagonist, but have a male protagonist that was courageous.
Yes. Sensitive.
as many artists are, not necessarily, not all artists are, but there is a certain, even if you're a crass artist or brash, or there's something in you that is fine-tuned or sensitive.
Yes, in order to tap in to the
Yes.
artistic vein within you, it has to be.
And so, and there have been throughout history male artists that have been supportive of female artists, be it a father and their
Yes.
daughter, or just somebody that is a lover, you know, like Rodin and Camille Claudel. And
Yep.
so,
Monet.
well, that gets into another story.
Yes, that's a whole nother.
But and so
Thank you, Kate.
and so Pêro was born of the time period and representing basically all males that are willing to put their own life and their own egos on the line to support the passion of creativity that wants to come also through the female, because a secondary character is Paulina, but she could have been the protagonist, but she could have been, but I decided that that because of the time period, she would have been working behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And so you'll see when you get into the story, the constraints that Paulina was working under. But I really wanted to, first of all, celebrate the contributions of Portuguese artisans, and their magnificent works that haven't gotten as much limelight as other countries and other artists and other types of artwork. I mean, Portuguese tile, because it's publicly displayed, it's a heart, and for me, when visiting Portugal, it's the heart and soul, you know.
Right.
It's just, it's so accessible. It's a people's art.
Right. You don't have to buy a ticket to a museum in order to see it. You can breathe among it.
Exactly. Or you can do both.
Or you can do both. Yes, you can. You can. No, I thought it was a daring choice, but I think you did it superbly. And
thank you.
You made him an accessible character. He's just I don't want to give too much away about him. There are just so many layers to this man that make him deserving of this story. You really created one of those one-of-a-kind characters. That's what hooked me in, to be perfectly honest. And I think that's true. I think readers want to read about people first and their circumstances. And this character is one that will give readers a sense of the lives of the time, of the artists of the time, the history of the time, and the art, the tile making itself. You've just created him so superbly.
And the complications of the time, and like also living with excessive wealth. If you have a moral compass, or you have you care about things besides just wealth, there's challenges that have to be met.
Yeah. So the true position of women artists at the time, were they allowed legally any rights to create art and sell it under their own name?
When I posed these questions to the art historian at the University of Lisbon, what she came back to me with was that there really, around the tile trade, there isn't information. It's not part of the written history. But the fact is that women wouldn't have been just out and about walking the streets, just one-on-one. You would always be accompanied by other people. And also the climate, kind of the climate of the continent, on the whole continent of Europe, was at this time that it was like an artist is kind of like an actress or a prostitute.
They were
in the entertaining trades, and which were looked down upon in comparison to other trades. And so and also, and I think this still holds true today, in some pockets, that people have a hard time taking direction and accepting the brilliance of a woman when it comes to creative endeavors still.
That's true.
And
Unfortunately, it is very true. I think last year's Oscars, when Little Women, was it last year or the year before, when Little Women won Best Picture, but its director wasn't even nominated. She was a woman. It was startling. It
so
really was.
I'm trying to address this conversation because there's still work to do. There's still inroads to be made.
There are.
And so it's like going back to the history addresses the roots of these things and that where we are today, you know, and so it brings it back to the table in present time for this conversation. And with the tile factory, with being located in the Macombo, and this goes along with the questions that I had been asking this art historian at the University of Lisbon, was same thing with Africans. What were their contributions? What were the descendants of Africans? What were their contributions to the tile trade? Again, it's ambiguous.
Because it was left out of history.
Exactly, and it's oral history. And so, but it's easy to, and I feel, like I said, I fielded these questions with this PhD of tile, and she just, you know, I said they had to have been working in these tile factories at doing something, you know,
Sure.
be it, I mean, contributing in some way, and then doing research. I have some photos from the Fabrica Santa Ana, which is still in existence today. And there are, in these images are people of mixed ancestry. And I was like, there it is. You know, there's the visual image in a photo.
That they
People
were
were
there.
working, yes, even though we don't know their names, you know, directly their names, but they had to been participating. There were kilns to be fired. It was clay to be worked out, the air worked out of the
Menial
clay,
jobs.
and also all the design, the transport. And then there's also artworks, tile artworks depicting Africans and their descendants. And so they were included in the works. You know, there's images of fishermen with in boats with nets in tile, or a cook flaying a fish. And
Sure.
so, and who are the people that painted those? I don't know. Those were the questions I was asking myself. Who
Sure.
painted them?
And what you were able to achieve, and even though it's told from a male point of view as your lead character, you shine a light on the fact that all these other stories have been left out. The women's story, the African story that goes in, that is part and parcel of this tile history. And that's part of what makes this book so fascinating, is you were able to accomplish so very much. Yes, it's his story, but it's
inclusive.
It's very inclusive.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. And but you did it. It wasn't contrived. It wasn't forced. It just flowed very naturally.
Because it was based on the actual art artifacts that show us.
Right.
These people were there.
They were there.
They were there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the job of us as historical novelists, is
Fascinating.
then to fill in those gray zones, or imagine, put the pieces together that we do have.
Right.
And stay open. I mean, a lot of it, I mean, honestly, I would just be like in front of my computer and the voices would just come through, you know.
Fabulous. Don't you do a jig when that happens? I
Yeah,
know.
they open up well, you know, through me.
Yes.
And
An
I guess
almost spiritual experience.
I had lived in Africa from 1994 to 1997 as a Peace Corps volunteer, and I loved my time in Africa. I lived in Niger. It's made up of, it's next to Chad and Mali, underneath Libya, above Nigeria. So the Sahara Desert, the Sahel. And so I had lived with people and heard stories actually that reach back to this time period. I had heard the stories from the people themselves about people being captured and people that were actually enslaved in Africa from different warring tribes. And I lived with a minority group of people called the Fulmangani, and whose language isn't written, and it's a Creole language made up of 4 languages, and it was very hard to learn. I had to listen to learn it. I listened for almost 2 years, and they were the ones that told me about the slave trade, people being captured and exported through the Sahara Desert like tethered goats.
My goodness.
Sent to Europe, yes. And so it was coming through grassroots. These are the voices, and talking about their ancestors. So
well, you get around, girl.
I've had a lot of reincarnations in one incarnation.
You have, but it lends a depth to your writing. Anybody who reads this book will see the depth of your travels around the world in the writing. It was worth it. It was
I love my time there, and I learned, and I have gratitude. It makes me tear up.
Okay, so let's move on because time's getting a little tight. Something very important, though, to the story is, how did the great Lisbon earthquake impact the country, the tile making, the continent, and how is it all tied together?
Okay, so a lot of people, let's talk about the 18th century. Everybody knows about the French Revolution.
Yes.
And the impact that it had.
Far-reaching.
Yeah, far-reaching. But the Great Lisbon earthquake, 1755, November 1st, is also the most important historical event of the century, of the 18th century, besides the French Revolution. It influenced Voltaire. Candide was inspired.
That's true.
By the Great Lisbon earthquake. It affected theology, philosophy, also seismic buildings, like building in, I don't know exactly what it's called, but the flexibility of architecture to withstand great earth shocks this is the first time that's what came out of this Great Lisbon earthquake. And so it affected the whole of the continent, and the earthquake was felt as far as actually as Boston. I mean, there are accounts, written accounts.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and in Ireland also.
My goodness.
And so, and all up north in Northern Europe. And so the effects were very, very widespread. And it was a time when in Europe, you had the ideas of the Enlightenment being reason.
Yep.
Flourishing in the north, or beginning to be a movement, a very strong movement.
The humanity movement, yes.
And then you had in the Iberian Peninsula, Catholicism and the Inquisition still in place as is the stronghold, as the answer for all things. And when this earthquake struck and leveled Lisbon, I mean, it completely, she was called the Queen of Seas up to this point, and the Princess of Europe. I mean, she was considered the most beautiful city in all of Europe at this time period. And when the city was destroyed on November 1st, on one of the most important church holidays, it really brought into question the role of God and reason. And it brought these two philosophies head on with each other. It's like, what is truth? And it was a very dynamic. Yeah, it completely, it changed Portugal's position
as a world player.
Yes, but there's more to come, because the resurrection was magnificent. And there's that
So
would be.
what happened to the tile factories? Were they,
Some of them are destroyed, and I'm actually going to get into that in book 2. There is a sequel for the
Wonderful.
series coming, and I will be, we'll get into all of that exciting stuff after post-earthquake.
poster?
I mean,
Right.
in Cut from the Earth, there is, we do get into it a little bit, but we'll get really into it.
Right. In the coming book.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
And for everybody that's here, and we do have some questions for you to get to,
Okay.
give us your elevator pitch. Tell everybody in 2 or 3 sentences the gist of Cut from the Earth.
It's a story of a Portuguese tile maker who risks everything to help the enslaved through art, through the proceeds of art, to survive and seek freedom and realize freedom at the time of the Great Lisbon earthquake of 1755.
Perfect. And what a character he was, as I've already said. Beautiful. Great
And there's
pick.
surprises in there. There's surprises in there.
There are, but we don't want to give any of that away. We're at almost 10 of, if you want to. There's a whole bunch of comments on the chat. Do you see them down below?
Yes, let's see here.
And there's questions. We want to give everybody a
Look
chance.
here.
Excuse us.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's a question here from Pat. How did you go about choosing the characters to bring your story to life? I would say that the characters actually chose me. I didn't choose them. They chose me. They sprang forth from essence awareness itself, from consciousness itself. Let's see. Yes, there's a question here from Shelley. Did the different tile making factories have different patron saints? Yes. And you will see once you start reading what the Fabrica Santa Maria's was.
So the fabrics themselves had patron saints?
Yeah, it was very, very common. And I mean, you'll see that still today throughout the Americas. People will have different saints that they have in their shops, and also like in South Asia, different deities.
Sure. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
You know, as in The Glassmaker's Daughter, I'm writing about glass-making factories. And, you know, Roman Catholicism, obviously, we're in Venice and Italy, so Roman Catholicism was indisputable. But I don't recall them ever adopting that custom.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
granted that was my second book, and my memory.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know the history of that. You know, I don't know what, because very Catholic country also. I mean, obviously.
Sure. Right, so, right.
That would be interesting to look further.
But that they chose just one as a patron saint in the tile factories is that's a fascinating little tidbit.
Well, let me clarify a little bit. I don't know if it's specific just to tile makers, but it was very common, like Saint Anthony is the patron saint of Lisbon. And so that would have been common for them to have in their shop.
Sure, sure.
Let's see here. Here's another question here from Scott Moeller. It must have been hard to think and write with the 18th century mindset. It was. I mean, honestly, for at least 7 years of my life, I kind of was living 300 years back, you know, like in another, I'd be at dinner in this time period, but I really wasn't there. It was 300 years ago. So yes, and also just doing like things like I made tiles while I was writing this book. I made actual Portuguese inspired blue and white tiles, and you know, to live your story as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a comment in the chat, Stephanie. Are there other tile works you'd like to see that you haven't been able to yet?
Oh my gosh, throughout all of Portugal. Yeah, completely.
There is. Yeah, that was from Drummer Drug, and she loved your book.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Let's see here. Also, so this is an interesting question from Katie. You've had very interesting experiences in your life. Do you possibly foresee using that as story plots? Well, you can't help it. Sometimes it just comes through you. The things that you live end up in your writing in one way or another, not necessarily holistically, but some thread comes through. And but the answer to that is yes. And that's for the third book in the series. So
So you're planning that far ahead?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know how many maybe in the series?
I can say for sure it's a duology. There's for sure 2, but I'm pretty sure there's 3. So it's a trilogy. But
fantastic.
I think will write itself through me here. So
yes, and I think every author should have the T-shirt. Be careful, or you'll end up in my novel. I just think we should have badges or something so everybody in our personal life knows. Maybe it'll keep them on better behavior. I know my ex-husband is probably thinking that after the first book in the Da Vinci's Disciples. I didn't say that. That's yeah. See, that's what happens when 2 friends kibitz on the computer and forget there are other people listening. Sorry. You still have some questions there, I think.
Let's see here.
Oh, I love this. Can you talk about the tensions Pêro has between time for his art and the drag of business worries?
Yes, that is addressed in there because it is a very real thing. And it's in the first third of the book. So you have to read to get into the mindset of how it is for an artist.
For me, the second part of that question is, has it changed for us all that much?
I don't think so.
I think it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, I think because your time is there's so many demands on it today.
So many demands. I know that I will have moments where I'm instructed by contract or by my publisher to do certain social media things. And I will have a little tantrum and just scream out, Hemingway never had to do this. So I do think that what Pêro experienced has actually been exacerbated in our own time.
Yeah, well.
That was a fascinating portion of the book too. Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. There's a question here from Erin. Let's see.
Oh.
I love how you chose a protagonist to be male.
Yes, Kate.
Okay, I love how you chose a protagonist to be male to act as a positive antidote to the disruptive and destructive impact of many patriarchal influences. I can't wait to read your book. I can't wait for you to read the book too, Erin. Yes, I mean, I wanted to be true to the time period and the true constraints of women. While there are examples of women that were given a lot of, I guess, leeway or a longer leash, I guess, to create, there were still constraints. And oftentimes it would have been within like the cloister of a nunnery. You know, like you can create all you want as long as you're in, you know, cloistered.
Right, as long as you can't get out with it.
Right. And so it made it, right now it's very popular female protagonists, and I'm all of support, and I will at some point also be writing female protagonists. And but there was something, and again, it wasn't I can't claim that it was planned. It just came through to honor the time period and the power structures that would have been in place. I tried to recreate them as they really would have been, not how I wish them to be from a 20th century point of view.
But I think we have to face the fact, though some maybe second and third generation feminists might not want to do this, but women's evolution, whether it's in art or in any enterprise, there had to be men who were supportive.
Yeah, and it was supportive
and
men that helped make the inroads, and that's what Pêro represents. And there are many wonderful men today that too support their creative wives or their daughters, and we need each other.
Right. And I think as much as, the female protagonist may be more in vogue, let's say right now, I think highlighting these men needs to be equally important. We shouldn't, as females, make the same mistake as most of the men did.
Well put, Donna, well put.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you've done that beautifully.
Well, and also in Donna's book, I just have to share, she's done a really good job actually of that here in this book. The Glassmaker's Daughter, 17th century glassmaking, Murano glass in Italy and Venice. Fantastic. So
thank you, sweetie.
um,
Any more questions?
There's one here from Shelley. Were there also secret Muslims that did? I'm sure, Shelley, the question was, were there also secret Muslims that did stay, Moors that stayed and converted to hold on to their own secrets? Yes. And again, I really celebrate and I address that in the story, because we do things for many reasons. And if you have to go under the guise of another religion in order for the land that you love or somebody else that you love in your life, but you will retain the things that are valuable to you, it's in the story. And it goes, same thing for the Portuguese Jews were forced to become, they were called New Christians. Right. And yet, without a doubt, they were practicing and held on to their beliefs. I mean, and it goes same thing with the sacred feminine that was, shoved under, early, like 2,500 years ago.
Yes.
But to hold on to we see it today, it's coming, it's like bursting from the earth itself. These values, they haven't been lost. We have to be really clever, to keep things that we care about alive. And there's always a way to do it. And through the arts, oftentimes is a way that it happens, be it through literature or, visual arts.
Visual arts. Yes.
So yeah.
Here's an interesting, did you research about the influence of astrology when you're in Lisbon? Or is your information?
Who brought that up? That's a great question.
Does
it say?
Oh, it just dropped his name.
I will touch on that. And thank you for asking that question. It's a great question, because actually, yes, astrologers were very prevalent in this time period. And there is a character in the story. Her name is Conga Carlotta, the astrologer. And she is inspired by historical facts. There are books that are produced by the post office. The Portuguese post office produces these fantastic coffee table books with tons of great information. And astrology is one of the focuses within one of my research texts that are at the back of the book. You can go look it up when you read the book. But yes, astrology. So astrology it was very, very popular at this time. And it was a risky trade because on the one hand, people wanted their charts read, but then you're playing a very fine line with the church, between divining and truth. So
exactly,
perceived truth. So
another great character. I thought all your characters were superbly developed. Yeah, that's one of my look for things in a book. I want to just connect to that character, and you did a marvelous job with all of yours. Alexandra Sands asked the astrology question.
Thanks. Great question, Alex.
All right, we're a little bit past,
Okay.
but did you want to take just one more scroll through the questions to make sure you
let's
got
see
them
here.
all?
Let's see. I think the questions here. Well, there's a lot here in the chat. I think.
Think we got them all?
Let's see here. I think so. If there, let's see. Did you research for them? I think so. Any other questions that you have, just please feel free to reach out to me either in social media on Facebook or send me an email. You can go to my website at www.stephaniereneedosantos.com and go to contacts, and my email is there.
You
And
want to type that into the chat, Stephanie,
sure,
so people can find it who are interested?
sure.
While you're doing that, I just want to read this comment. I so love how you chose to include inclusion as the antidote to cultural erasure. What a fabulous comment. I can't see who put it, but that's a
I think
beautiful
it was
comment.
It was Erin, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that is exactly what she did in a brilliant manner, while bringing this art very much to life.
Yes, Marcia, I hope I'm saying your name right. This event is recorded, and that was a good time for me to send the link to our YouTube channel. It'll be a couple days before this one is uploaded, but I just sent the link to our YouTube channel where you can view past events and this one once it's up on the website. And there you see Stephanie's email also if you have any more questions for her. I also sent a link to the Village Books website where you can find Cut from the Earth. And Stephanie, if you could hold Donna's book up one more time, you can also, book is also on that page. They're on the same page. And I just learned this an hour ago, but I thought it was cool. That's Donna's art. Yeah, that's Donna's own art on the cover. So I thought that was cool.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you guys for a lovely discussion.
Hey, Tolly, thank you so much for being here and hosting.
My pleasure.
Go ahead.
And same thing, Donna. Thank you so much. Fantastic.
Thank you for the privilege.
Your presence.
Thank you for the privilege of talking to you about this great book. It's going to do wonderfully. I just know it. Get it, your copy today.
Thanks. And also, I wanted to just share real quick too. There's a good chance in 2022 that Donna and I might be teamed up together at Ireland Writer Tours, and we'll like to invite any other people that would like to come with us. I
mean, between the two of us, there will not be a boring moment, and there will be there. And let's not even talk about Guinness. We won't even bring that into the equation, but a wealth of knowledge. It would be fantastic.
So,
well,
so much gratitude to Village Books and Dichali.
Yeah, and thank you so much to our audience as well for joining us today. Yes. We're always glad to have you. All right.
Thank you for coming and being present, and any questions,
and happy launch day to Stephanie.
Happy launch day. All right. Thank you guys so much, and have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
Great day.